Let's pick up a story we were chatting about a little earlier, a campaign pushing for South Africa to arrest Russian President Vladimir Putin should he arrive here in August for the Brics summit, launched today. Now, it's taking the form of billboards around South Africa. I'm going to show you some of those images. And those billboards are urging President Ramaphosa to act on the International Criminal Court's warrant of arrest for Putin for alleged war crimes in Ukraine. Now, the campaign has been put together by Avaaz, which is a US-based global activism network. And I'm joined now by Fadi Quran, campaign director at Avaaz. He joins us from Ramallah in Palestine. Thank you so much for joining us. And it's a really eye-catching billboard. I know that you're mostly an online-based sort of activism group, and you get a lot of online signatures. Talk to me about this billboard campaign, how it came about, why you came up with this particular strategy.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Sally. And Avaaz does a lot of online mobilization. We have about 70 million members across the world. But we actually, after mobilizing online, take action in the real world, whether that's for Palestinian rights against Israel and Palestine, and in this case, in South Africa, because we wanted to put these billboards on the road that President Ramaphosa and other government officials take on their way to office every morning, so that they know that the world wants them to honor South Africa's human rights legacy and take action against President Putin and other war criminals, because it is crucial that when individuals commit atrocities such as abducting children from their families, and I think the audience listening in right now understands how painful it is just if you lose your child for 5 minutes at the mall. So imagine thousands of families who have had their children forcibly taken from them. And we hope that the South African government and President Ramaphosa understand that it is on them to ensure that this crime doesn't go without justice.
The message coming from the South African government is, we won't arrest him because he'll have diplomatic immunity. And this is a confusing situation because at the same time, South Africa is not only a signature to the Rome Statute, so supports the International Criminal Court, it's also written into our local laws. But our government is saying he won't be arrested, he'll have diplomatic immunity. What do you say to that?
We think that legal position is actually not grounded in South African law. From speaking with and engaging with some of South Africa's key lawyers, it's clear that the Diplomatic Immunities and Privileges Act, that relates to when dignitaries visit South Africa and maybe they have a traffic violation, something like speeding, or those types of crimes that are committed, by visiting dignitaries. But when it comes to international crimes, when it comes to atrocities, then this immunity law is not applicable in South Africa or elsewhere. And it's still the responsibility, the legal responsibility of the South African government to arrest Putin and other war criminals and that have arrest warrants on them if they visit this territory.
Officially, we're non-aligned. Officially, we are neutral in the war in Ukraine. But whenever you read into the ANC policy documents or even take a closer look at what the ANC members are saying, it's very clear there's a lot of support for President Vladimir Putin. And it seems to be a sense that this man doesn't care what the West says. This man was provoked by NATO because NATO was getting uncomfortably close for him to Ukraine. What do you say to the ANC? And I ask that specifically because the ANC has been very vocal and had no problem taking a stand to support Palestine, as you clearly do as well, and yet cannot muster that same support for the suffering in Ukraine, rather focusing on their support for Vladimir Putin because he seems to be defying the West.
So in terms of that framing, I want to be clear. I think from a political standpoint, it's actually wise for the ANC to take a non-aligned position vis-a-vis the conflicts that exist between Russia and Western countries. And that's from a standpoint of being very clear that the West has been responsible for war crimes. It has created a selective international order where certain war criminals are not punished, whereas others are punished. And that type of hegemonic system needs to be challenged. Now, that said, what I would say to the ANC is two wrongs don't make a right. And in this case, when there are individuals like President Putin who are committing these crimes, non-alignment does not mean a lack of a moral position and a lack of a human rights-focused position that reflects what the ANC has historically stood for. And I would argue that it would be crucial here for the ANC, in seeking to create this multipolar world where the West is not being oppressive, that they base that new world order that President Ramaphosa spoke to today in Parliament based on human rights, based on human dignity. And that's why I would argue that they have to, based on those standards and based on the world that South Africa seeks to create, take action against President Putin. And doing so does not mean aligning themselves with the West. It means that they are aligning themselves with respecting the ideals of freedom, of dignity, and in this specific case, also with the idea of protecting children from abuses. And that's, I think, what people need to remember. In this case, it is because Ukrainian children, thousands of them, based on clear evidence, have been abducted from their families. And such a crime should not be unpunished in this case.
So then how do you, and I hear it's a nuanced issue, but it must be difficult for you in choosing your campaigns to choose what to highlight. So if you think of what happened with the weapons of mass destruction that never were in Iraq, and America used that as the basis to invade Iraq and bring England and bring United Kingdom along as well, and it was shown that it was faulty intelligence reports. The United States has never really answered to that. Is that a campaign that you would support? Is that a campaign that you would say needs to be answered? Because, as you say, we need to call out everyone equally, don't we?
Yes, and it's not only a campaign I would support, it's actually a campaign that our organization has run and continues to focus on. And we believe there should be pressure to hold President George Bush to account for the war crimes committed in Iraq. I'm from the Middle East, and I've been to the countries where American foreign policy have led to hundreds of thousands of people killed. I also believe Tony Blair should be held for account. And we have run campaigns focusing on that and also targeting the UK for its sale of weapons that were used to commit war crimes in Yemen. And so I would make very clear to the audience here that this campaign targeting President Putin, for us, it's part of a consistent policy where we believe that any global leader, whether it's President Bush, whether it's Netanyahu in Israel, who the Israeli government is committing the crime of apartheid here in Palestine where I live, all of these actors should be held accountable. And as human rights organizations, we believe that South Africa can be a leader in this space. It can actually be the beacon that pushes this position, that it depoliticizes these topics and ensures simply justice prevails, regardless of who the criminal actor is. And I've engaged with South African leaders on the issue of Palestine, and they have taken strong positions, and I believe they should continue to push against the United States to ensure that Israel is held accountable in these cases. But similarly, it would actually make the South African government stand on stronger ground in the eyes of the world. And I think this is why this is a strategic position for them to take. If they tell President Putin, we are consistent in how we engage in human rights, and we don't believe that what you did is something that we can forgive, and we certainly will not roll out the red carpet for your visit.
Yeah, so your Billboard campaign is certainly going to place this issue top of mind for a lot of people in South Africa and hopefully a lot of politicians. Very briefly, how much support so far for this campaign, and what will you do with that support?
Yeah, we've only launched this campaign almost a week ago, and it's already garnered over 500,000 signatures. And what we're going to do is we're going to mobilize our members in South Africa, where we have tens of thousands of members, but also across the world, to continue to put pressure and create a positive momentum for President Ramaphosa and this government to do the right thing and to vow to not let any war criminal, including Putin, to get away with their crimes.
I want to thank you so much for speaking to us. Really thought-provoking, fascinating discussion. Fadi Quran, campaign director at Avaaz, which is a US-based global activism network. They've launched billboards around the country today, urging our president to arrest Vladimir Putin should he come to South Africa.